Kara, how are you? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm great. Thanks for having me here.
How are you?
I'm doing really well. It's a beautiful
Yeah.
day in LA. No complaints.
Isn't every day beautiful in LA? Isn't that part of the mystique?
That is what Steve Martin told us in LA Stories.
um,
Yes, we sometimes I switch from the long sleeve t-shirt to the short sleeve t-shirt around this time of year.
it is. I tell people living in California is great. My son doesn't own any pants. It's just all shorts 24/7. Yeah.
That's well, should send him to the East Coast where
No, I don't think he could do it. Well, hey, it's great to see you. I haven't seen you in a long time. I missed the Upfront Summit. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go, but I heard it was awesome. You guys always, that's got to be the biggest. Is that the biggest venture capital event of the year? It's got to be.
I definitely think it's the most unique, coolest,
Yes.
executed one, but I am a little biased. So,
yes.
yeah, I think it's, having not had it for a couple of years, I really have really appreciated it even more so this year. So hopefully you'll come back next year.
I will be there. I will be there. Well, we only have a half hour, so I'd love to jump in. I'd love for you just to share with folks a little bit of your background, and then we'll sort of get into where you are today and what you're doing and all that kind of stuff. But a little bit about your background and how you found your way to venture capital.
Yeah, well, I grew up with like doctors and teachers and policymakers, and moving money around was not a thing that anyone in my family knew how to do. And so when I graduated from college, I was one of those people who went in knowing exactly what I wanted to do, and by senior year, I had absolutely no idea. And so I was deciding between working for Ralph Nader. It's nonprofit, and it was before he was a third party candidate. It was when he was like, a consumer protection guy. It was this nonprofit track coming out of my college at Morgan Stanley, and like literally,
those are two different things. That's funny.
So I still say I have both of those sides of my personality or my interests. But somebody came to me, and it was right when like all the investment banks started going to colleges and thought that they could hire people who were liberal arts majors. And I think I was just probably pretty good at interviewing, because I honestly didn't know the difference between debt and equity. I remember a guy named Steve Lasser teaching it to me the night before my Morgan Stanley interview. But they said, hey, come to Morgan Stanley, learn how stuff works, and then you'll be able to do more in nonprofits. Just consider it a 2-year thing. And here we are many years later. But I would say I ended up being placed in their merchant banking group, which was essentially like a captive private equity fund. So I literally went in and had to learn Excel, and then I had to learn Lotus because half the models were in Lotus. And what I found is that I was locked up building models for 100 hours. And then I started working with the telecom team there, and that was like the hot, cool team at the time.
Telecom was cool back in the day.
It was cool. This was like the mid to late 90s. And so I got really into telecom, and I started reading books like Electrical Engineering for Dummies kind of books. And it was like raising my hand to go to DSL and cable modem conferences. And then I remember I cold called a company. So I'm like, this company looks really cool. And they were like, that's not what we do here. You just sit back there and model. And so somebody I'm still in touch with, a guy named John Ehrenkrantz came to me and said, you might like this venture capital thing. Do you want to go down the hall to the venture capitalist? And so I went down the hall to the venture capitalist at Morgan Stanley. And then I went and talked to one other venture firm that I had sat in a room with the guy who started the firm on one of these telecom companies. And that was Battery Ventures. And the guy named Rick Frisbee. And Rick, I call my venture father figure, and he is still that for me. But I was like, you know what, if I'm going to go do venture, I want to do it in the headquarters. I want to do it like I was from California. I'll go to Boston. That's where most of the partners were. They didn't have an office in San Francisco at the time. And I think I should go do it like in a separate firm, not inside Morgan Stanley. And so in 1999, when I was 23 years old, I moved up to Boston. Somebody handed me a bunch of magazines like Mass High Tech and Storage World. Sunil Dhaliwal from Amplify was given to me as my mentor. He said, good luck, I'm going to Europe, call somebody else. And I just started cold calling people. And so I went from like not talking to anyone and just building models to cold calling CEOs who were 30 years older than me and wore tie necklaces and lived off of Route 128.
So this was okay. So college, banking, venture, but you've done a few startups along the way as well. Talk a little about that.
Oh yeah. I always wanted to I remember one of the founders I was involved in backing when I was an associate at Battery said, you should get a real job. And I was like, what do you mean? I work really hard. This feels like a real job. He's like, no, like, when are you actually make things people use where you're not trying to sell them money, which most people should want anyway. And so I think I had that in my head. And when I went to business school, I worked, there were only 2 tech internships. I ended up working for Microsoft, and that was terrific. But there were a bunch of reasons. Seattle didn't call to me at the time. And anyway, I ended up going and working for Barry Diller and IAC. Actually, my boss was the vice chairman, a guy named Victor Kaufman. And then I ended up working at IAC for 7 years, and then I ended up starting my own company. So did M&A, buying and selling. I mean, everything you can imagine. At the time, we just bought Vimeo, and then we wanted to sell Vimeo, and we were incubating virtual worlds, which are now called metaverses, and spinning out Expedia.
But IAC must have been a great experience for venture, because you kind of see everything. You see the operating, you see the acquisition, you see all pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. And in a lot of ways, I mean, I think venture's so subjective, and it takes such a long time when you're in a big firm, that to be in a place that was like thrown into the lion's den, you were promoted really quickly. They were always looking for talent to move around. And that was incredibly exciting. So I ended up spending 3 years in corporate in the M&A group. I ended up running M&A. And then I moved into an operating role, and I ran a bunch of the business units when I moved back to LA. And so, and then I was involved in incubating Tinder there when I was pregnant with my 3rd daughter. So I was definitely not a user. And then I looked around, and actually Sean Rad, who started Tinder, was like, hey, Kara, come join us, or go start something, do something with your life. So then I left, and I started an e-commerce company that Upfront funded. And when I sold that company, my partner Mark said, come join us. And that was about 7 years ago.
Wow. I remember when you joined Upfront. I didn't think it was 7 years ago. Wow. Geez, I'm getting old.
You look very young, by the way. You must have a great filter, because I haven't seen you in person in a long time.
I have the 10 years younger filter. It's custom. It's a premium feature on Zoom. And so, okay. So you join Upfront, and then talk about sort of that experience and what you've seen happen over the last 7 years, and maybe what I'd also just love to hear. We haven't caught up in a while. So what's happening with the tech ecosystem in LA?
I think the tech ecosystem. So I'll start with the last question. We can come back to the other one if you'd like. But I think the tech ecosystem in LA is vibrant. We would say that people are talking about Miami, but moving to LA.
If you can get no state income taxes in LA, I think you'd get a lot of people moving.
Yeah, though, you know what? I think that's the price for living in the best city in the world. So, a lot of people did move down here during COVID, and like important people, you're starting to get like, hey, the founder of this big company that Square bought is moving to LA, or this, that, or the other. And so, I mean,
it really is amazing. Like Brian Armstrong from Coinbase bought a house down there. I know Spencer from Zillow's now down there. He moved from Seattle down there. There's a lot of, obviously Mark Andreessen bought this like mega house in Malibu, but it is funny how many people I meet who I think live here, and they're like, yeah, I've been spending a lot of time in Santa Monica or wherever. I'm like, oh, interesting.
By the way, Spencer and I grew up together. He was my student body president in high school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
Spencer
a small
and I
world.
have known each other way, way, way back. But yeah, I think a lot of people are coming back. A lot of people are moving down. It does feel different. Like there's a huge new generation of young people, of, crypto adjacent, a lot of Hollywood IP, NFTs, et cetera. And then we're seeing a lot of really interesting healthcare, biotech, even like alternative medicine, psychedelics. I think a lot of like the cultural elements of sort of the LA, New York corridor around some of the new trends coming out of COVID around tribes, religion, sports, all of this stuff you're feeling a lot of here these days. Just meeting some really interesting, different, open-minded people, I would say, which has been fun, which are everywhere. But also maybe that it's just the first time I've left my house in a long time.
Hey, what do you know? These people are so cool. Yeah. They don't live in my house.
Exactly. They don't have one of my facial features. How nice to meet them.
That's funny.
So, but yeah, obviously it's evolved a lot. Like when I moved back here, I was with IAC and I sort of moved back here reluctantly. I mean, I think it was, when was it? It was probably 2000 and end of 2007. I grew up here. I lived all over the East Coast. I lived in the Bay Area. I worked for Battery in the Bay Area too. And I kind of moved back thinking I would never go back into venture because I'm like, oh, if I'm in venture, I'd be in the Bay Area. I don't want to be in this. And it has really flipped for me over the last decade, where I feel like there are positives to every place you do venture, but it's nice to be in a place where I'm surrounded by different industries and people who do different things. I think it allows me to constantly recharge my energy for this crazy transactional, occasionally soulless business that we're in.
And you're also the owner of a sports team.
Yeah, so crazy, right?
Talk about that. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I don't know very many sports team owners, so I'm lucky to know you.
Well, thank you. We would love to have you down to a game to check out the schedule for Angel City after this. That is actually a little, in a weird way, a little bit more connected to like the Ralph Nader part of my life. So there's this butterfly effect, a sequence of things that happened, I think really starting with All Rays, where, you know, I went to that dinner I leaned through as one of the 15 women who showed up, and we started working on stuff, and then All Rays was born. And then I took on in the early days a couple things, but one of the things I took on was building a partnership with a nonprofit organization down here called Time's Up. That was sort of the equivalent in entertainment, and then expanded to all industries. And I just made a bunch of new friends, and we had nothing to do business wise together, right? They were actresses and entertainment people, etc. And it was almost like this is when women found each other and became friends. And so I was really energized around getting the women's soccer players paid on the U.S. women's national team. And I honestly think I just sort of talked about that. Well, I sort of talked about that and the business opportunity around women's soccer for about 4 years, primarily because I couldn't find jerseys to buy or content to watch after I went to a U.S. went to a World Cup game in 2015. And eventually I became friendly with the head of the players union for the national team. And the one person I talked to who really lit up when I was talking about this topic was Natalie Portman. And so we just started doing stuff together to bring awareness to the pay equity stuff. Like we were actually thought we were being activists. And then I don't know.
And just for folks who don't know, talk about the pay equity issue and how I've read about it. I'm not as close to it as you are, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's just without going into all the details, and you guys can Google it. The U.S. women's national soccer team is the winningest team in women's soccer. Drives more viewership than the men's team.
Way more well known than the men. Yeah,
you're right. The more well known as players. You know, I mean, by the way, love the men too. We want all of our teams to
right. but all the iconic figures that I think of in U.S. soccer, like Brandy Chastain, all these women that, you know, we grew up watching. I don't think I could name a single guy from the. I mean, I'm not a big soccer fan, but the women's team has been the women's team has been so iconic.
Yeah, and so there's also just like formulaically, how much do you get paid? Number of games, amount of winnings, et cetera, et cetera. And it was like wildly off from where the men were by all calculations. And so they filed a lawsuit against U.S. Soccer to get paid, and went on for a long time, and it was just settled. So it was a big deal. And but so that it was a big deal, and I was really energized around that. And I was also just energized around things like I wanted to buy the team's jerseys, right? When I wanted to buy a jersey for one of my daughters. I actually wanted to buy 3 jerseys for all of my daughters. And I went to 9 stores in Vancouver, the World Cup town, looking for jerseys. I found one jersey, no name on the back. I finally had to like call a connection at one of the agencies here, which is not the way it should happen. The way you get payers played is you show content, you have their jerseys available to purchase, et cetera. Yeah. So it's sort of like they're not being paid what they should be paid. But for me, like my venture capital brain started to light up where I'm like, if you have these big marketing activation events, but then you can't go buy or watch the content afterwards, you have no idea how big the market is. And 4% of sports media is focused on women's sports. So I'm like, well, what if you got it to 8%? And what happened for me was you could start following the players on Instagram. So there was like, a media distribution channel that didn't exist in the past. Mm-hmm. and their Instagrams were fabulous. And Jeff, you follow what, like basketball? You follow some sports, right?
Yeah, I follow a lot of stuff on Instagram. It's great. It's great. I
Well,
love the idea of athletes just going direct to the audience. It's awesome.
so I should have pulled these stats beforehand, but like the I think it's something like the top most followed college basketball players on Instagram are women, right? And so so anyway, so there was just this interesting mismatch of like people telling me people didn't want to watch stuff, but yet you saw a great engagement out of Instagram. And so I just kept like talking. I became friends with Natalie, and her son was really into Messi and Megan Rapinoe. And she heard Abby Wambach, who's one of the most storied players, talk about how she was one of the best players in the world, but she, has never made any money. Just a bunch of stuff came together. And then one day Natalie was said to me, she's like, maybe we should also start a team, right? We were holding salons and trying to bring awareness to the issue, and she'd bring her actress friends and they put it on. Nobody wanted to see my private Instagram, but they wanted to see hers. I'm good at organizing behind the scenes. Anyway, long story short, I literally thought she was crazy, and I have a reasonably optimistic and growth mindset.
Yeah.
And finally, I'm like, oh, she's serious, and I'm like, all right, I'll go explore it. And I started believing in the market opportunity and realized there was a professional league called the NWSL. Had been around for 8 or 9 years. And there was no team in LA, which was also crazy.
Which is crazy. Why would there, it's one of the biggest markets in the world. Why would there not have been an LA team? That was one of the things I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
Don't know. It just didn't occur to anyone.
It did. Like, we have 2 really successful men's teams here. We have LAFC, which was just started in the last 4 years, and we're playing in their stadium, Bank of California. It's one of the best stadiums, I think, in the world. It feels like soccer stadium meets Cabo Hotel. I'm not sure that's how I should market it, but actually it's where the Upfront Summit randomly happened to be this year.
Okay.
It's a beautiful stadium, and actually I think it's fabulous. Just take a trip sometime with one of your kids and visit soccer stadiums around the country, because they're all the most modern, like, sports stadiums you can see. So I'll go to Minneapolis and I'll be like, God, this is cool, or Louisville, and they're all very different and very specific to that sport.
Mm-hmm.
And playing in the right stadium really does change the experience. But the reason I don't know why there wasn't one. I think everyone was sort of like, hey, why don't you start it? Why don't you start it? Why don't you start it?
It's the same question we ask founders, and they're always like, I don't care.
Yeah,
there wasn't this before, and I created it.
Honestly, for me, it started as, I'm going to find somebody who's going to do this. And then I realized, like, nobody's doing it. And it seems to be a hobby that I'm working on a Saturday night at 10 p.m. Maybe I should just do it. And then it was this weird combination of like my perfect co-founders and Natalie. And then actually, I don't know if you know this, but the sport I played was basketball. Actually,
yeah.
My grandmother's basketball necklace from 1930 that she gave me when I was 13. And I played in a pickup basketball game here. And I recruited one of my friends who I'd played basketball against in high school, who was a gaming and streaming media executive. And I was like, hey, do you want to come learn women's soccer with me? Let me tell you why I think this is an interesting opportunity. It feels very venture-like. You just have to believe you're going to get distribution, some level of broadcast distribution, and you'll create a virtuous cycle around ticketing and sponsorships and the like. And she's like, sure. She was in the process of leaving a job. She's like, I'm going to take 6 months to figure out what I want to do anyway. And she's an incredible operator. Her name is Julie Ehrman, like one of the most incredible operators, if not the most incredible, one of the most, because all the founders we work with are
right.
But she's my co-founder, so it's different. And then, Natalie has this kind of like just inspirational way she sees the world, as someone who's built and managed her own brand in different kinds of businesses. And then I sort of knew how to navigate the capital markets and figure out, is there a real business case here? But it was not obvious who we would raise capital from. So we got like 99 no's, and then we got Alexis Ohanian to say yes. And that was life-changing. And it was like, we closed 2 weeks before COVID, and now we've sold over 15,000 tickets. We're selling out home opener. I hope we sell out the rest.
Amazing.
We're, dramatically exceeded all of our expectations and forecasts in the first year. We brought in 14 former U.S. national team players who are all LA or Southern California natives, Mia Hamm, Julie Foudy. That was probably the most special moment. But then also like actresses like Eva Longoria and Jessica Chastain and Uzo Duda and, America Ferrera, Billie Jean King, Lindsey Vonn. So it's this incredible also cap table and community that is the most community oriented cap table I have ever experienced in my life. And Julie and the team do an amazing job of engaging them. Like everybody shows up to our quarterly
That's awesome.
call, and it's fun.
That's cool. That's I invested in a tequila business, and it's like that. Everybody shows up for the investor
Really?
calls. Well, everybody shows up for the board meetings because they provide
Tequila?
swag and the product. So it's fun to be involved in those fun companies. They're hard. They're hard businesses to build, but if you can do it, it's a lot of fun.
By the way, Jeff, me, Natalie, and Julie are all tequila drinkers, and we always talk about if we were to incubate or partner in a deeper way with a consumer products.
I've got it for you. Compaveda Tequila. It means the spirit of sharing.
Oh.
And we also have a website, Siptequila.com. So you can go there, carry all the top brands are there, as well as Compaveda. So I'll send you a bottle of the Extra Añejo and also the Reposado, and you can try it and tell me what you think. Amazing stuff. Really, really great stuff. So
that sounds amazing. It's one of the few, we have active debate on almost everything other than tequila. So we all love tequila.
Well, this is it. It's a hard business to build, as I'm sure you know, but Chris, the founder, Chris Barban, Chris was the founder and CEO of Aperio, which was a company that I was on the board of, and he sold to Wipro for I think 500 million. And then he started Compaveda and Siptequila. So pretty amazing guy. It's been a fun business.
I will say this. I think from the dinner at Allray's to this, I always just tell people, follow your energy to do things that are not transactional and specific to
that. That's the theme here, right? It's you keep jumping into things that you're excited about and passionate about, and they work. And it's funny when I just was talking to somebody who's recently out of college yesterday, and she said, "What advice do you have for me?" And I basically said that. I said, just go find good people to work with, work on things that you care about, and work your ass off. And when you get to be my age, you will find that amazingly people who did that throughout their life are very successful. And the revisionist history may be different than that, but if you kind of look at it, it was like, well, I did this because of this, and I did this because of this, and I really enjoyed it, and I worked my ass off, and then I did this, and doors kept opening, and it's really, and it's fun too, right? But it's hard to understand that when you're 25 years old.
It makes you human too. I mean, it's sort of like the best thing that ever happened in my venture business too, because I invest a lot. I do invest in consumer and sports adjacent things, but I invest a lot in enterprise software, and you wouldn't think it was relevant, but now I'm in like fantasy Premier League with all these kind of men in Silicon Valley who come from Europe or India or wherever. That's awesome. And like, we've never had more fun, or I've never had more fun. I don't know if they're having fun with me, but I'm doing much better this year. So
yeah, that's great.
But by the way, my call to action there, if anyone ever wants to learn about women's sports, bring a team to their town. We've helped other people bring teams to their town, and there's just so much fun kind of collaboration and energy around it now. San Francisco will get one someday, and there's a good group that's come together there. But anyway, it's like a light a fire one place and have it spread.
I love that.
It's a lot of fun.
I love that. Yeah, you guys have really, it's been impressive to watch on social media. Just watch the whole thing grow. It's been fun. Switching to your venture, your day job.
Yes.
What are the market's kind of going through some crazy gyrations right now. What are you seeing with founders? What advice are you giving people? Just given your background and experience and having seen a couple of shifts in the market, what are you telling folks right now?
Yeah, I think we tend to come in at seed or sometimes A's, et cetera, pre-seed. That market feels like it hasn't been as impacted as growth, and I'm sure you talk about this a lot. You're the expert on this. I'm also on the board of growth stage companies that I grew up with, in a lot of ways, I think it's just being even and being consistent, which is don't smoke your own stuff. What's your balance sheet look like? Here's the fundraising environment. Let's just get very real about where you raised last time, what the milestones were, how they've shifted. So I think for me, in a lot of, I just try to stay consistent around that. We were talking about it in our partner meeting this week. Does anyone have companies that have cut? And it is sort of like, I don't think there's anything that's high panic for us around this. It's just like, starting to have, but there are certainly places where it's like, you have $30 million or $40 million on your balance sheet and $1 million in ARR, and the markets have changed, and you should be having that conversation anyway, right?
Right.
So I think in a way it can be helpful, because I think my great mentors and ventures said, in the end, everybody's got to make money. It's just a
Mhm.
matter of
Mhm.
when. And so, but I think it's hard, right? It's hard when I talk to my growth friends who are on many boards. And I mean, no one should cry over for growth VCs because you guys have all done quite well in the last 5 years. But there's obviously a huge psychological impact, and we have the
Yeah.
benefit of portfolio. And so there's a lot, I have a lot of empathy for the human element and the kind of fear and anxiety around that. So I try to just figure out where that founder is, and if they're not paying attention, there's obviously a lot of content marketing we can do right now to say, like, you should be doing this anyway, and you really should be doing it. But then I have founders on the other extreme that I work with on the other extreme that are overly worried about it. And it's like, we're here for you. If
Right.
like, we'll write you another check. Like, please don't worry about this. We control what we can control. And the best thing for you is to like take appropriate balanced risk. And good and bad things always come out of these times, and it's just your ability to move through them in a way that's consistent and mentally healthy.
Yeah, 100% agree. Yeah, I had dinner with a team last night, a management team, and I was talking about how devastating 0809 was, which in my opinion was far more challenging than the market we're in right now. I mean, the Russia-Ukraine thing is different. None of us have really dealt with that, but from a financial perspective, that was a really challenging time. But some of the best companies were built in that time. I was giving them the examples of Square and Zendesk and all these companies that we funded that went through these, challenging times, but that forced them to be a little more focused on their business. And then when the market was receptive and good, they had a good business that they could then accelerate. And I think a little bit of what's happening right now is you've got some people that were running businesses last year that weren't necessarily good businesses. And that is a mindset set shift. They were focused on raising capital and fueling this thing. And all of a sudden the market's telling them, hey, forget the capital raising thing. You actually have to run a company. And they're like, oh, that's the challenge. But it's good. It's very healthy. And the companies that are well capitalized and well run, I think are going to do extremely well this year.
And I'm just curious, how did 0809 feel different to you? Because I was operating then, I wasn't a VC. No, I did just have my first child, and remember brainstorming with my husband. We were both in finance jobs. Like, what skills do you have? Because I don't think I was like, at this point, we just had our first child. I'm like, I think the only thing I'm qualified for, I'm blind. I'm a little bit deaf. Like, maybe I could be a wet nurse, but other than that, I don't know what jobs I have. So we had like existential fear around livelihood, but I wasn't in venture, so I don't have that.
I had just gotten into venture in May of 2008, and and I had been a founder before that, and so it was a crazy time to join. But I think the thing that was craziest to me then was we literally, a very high percentage of people thought the American financial system was at risk, like existential. Banks, run on banks, Lehman Brothers collapsed. Like, this is not that. This is inflation. This is interest rates. This is Russia, Ukraine. But I don't think it's fear of our entire economic well-being. And so I think that's a little different. And so I also felt like back then people were less up because the preceding decade wasn't that great. Like post 2000 wasn't like amazing. Whereas we've just had like an amazing 10-year run in tech. And I think people are very optimistic about what the future looks like for cloud and consumer and healthcare and all digital payments, all these categories. It's sort of like we got to work through this current mode with inflation and interest rates and everything else. But the other side is really good. 0809, it wasn't that clear. The iPhone had just launched. Cloud was kind of a thing, but not really. E-commerce was still kind of the, really primitive version of e-commerce. So it wasn't to me, it's way more clear today that if you have a great business and you can work through the challenges of 2022, the other side is going to be really attractive. And you just have to power through it and run a good business and make sure you're well capitalized, hire good people, do the right things. But that situational awareness of like adjusting to the market you're in is a really important part of being a CEO. You have to be able to do that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, I was talking to my partner, Mark, about this last night. And I mean, we have a lot of optimism around, obviously it's not deglobalization, globalization, all the things, but supply chains between the US and Mexico, those are things we're looking at investing in, or, we've been doing sustainability in ag for a long time. This is not me, it's one of my partners, or healthcare related things. We're starting to see some really, anyway, so just cybersecurity, which is the place where I spend time. It's just the themes that are going to come out of this time, assuming that democracy and all the things stay together, I think are going to be exciting. I also think there's just an element of moving, hopefully, a little bit away from the mercenariness of the business and finding long-term partnerships. But that may be me sounding old. I don't know.
No. I think you're right. I think it's funny. Have you seen the show We Crashed on Apple
I haven't
TV
seen
Plus?
it.
It's
No,
pretty good.
I'm busy watching Winning Time.
Oh, that's good. Winning Time is good. It's pretty funny. The Jerry Buss character is quite funny.
I grew up clearly oblivious. I mean, I grew up watching every game, Magic Johnson, James Worthy, Michael Cooper, and I'm like, oh my God, this is what was happening.
I mean, I don't know how much of it's sensationalized. I'm sure there's some truth to it. It is pretty well done.
Yeah.
But anyways, in We Crash, there's this episode where they have the summer camp, and it's just ridiculous, right? It's like, it's what I've been telling people is like, let's move out of that era. Like, no more summer camps, no more, like, let's just build a great company, work on things you care about, work with great people. You don't have to worry about all that craziness. And I think it'll be, I could not be more optimistic on the road ahead. I just think you got to work through the current environment. And there is a big shift. You know, there's been a big shift in the funding environment, valuations, multiples, et cetera. And so part of being a good CEO is reading the tea leaves. You know, the analogy I gave one CEO was like, if you're laying out on the beach, putting on your SPF 30, and all of a sudden it starts hailing, you don't sit there and go, yeah, maybe I should use SPF 50. No, it's like, go get out of the hail or put on different clothes or get an umbrella or something. You got to actually react to the environment. Or to use a sports analogy, you know, the Warriors, who are just absolutely crushing it. I'm sorry, the Lakers are not in the playoffs.
Let's talk again next
week. But you know, they're playing a different lineup than they played for a lot of the season. Why? Because they're making an adjustment based on the team they're playing. And I think that's a good analogy for where we are with sport. Or with
Jeff, no one turns it around on you, and I know we're almost out of time, but where are you guys most focused on investing right now from a stage and industry standpoint, and has it changed?
It has not changed. So we are about 70% of what we do is Series A and B, has been for, 5-6 years. Nothing. I think that I'd say the only thing that's changed a little bit is over the last few years, consumer has been harder. You know, we sort of with the Facebook, changes with IDFA, that market just feels like it's gotten more challenging, whether it's in e-commerce or DTC or whatever piece of that puzzle you might be focused on. And so my partner, Hans, who really leads our efforts there, has been focusing on things that are adjacent, whether it's fintech or software businesses that are tied into some of those markets, so we can leverage our flywheels there. But yeah, like you talked about, I mean, on the cloud infrastructure and cybersecurity side, that market's booming. Software, where I spend my time, I think is just, there's so many, I focus a lot on vertical software and SMB. I mean, there's so much untapped market opportunity there that's pretty cool. And we've had companies like Procore and Toast and Shopify do really well, and Square, and
those are some good ones.
People are like, well, no, they're not, those aren't all ours, but they're showing people what can be done in these categories that nobody thought were that interesting.
Well, that's by the way what I used to do at IAC. I mean, I like Urban Spoon and City Search and Home and so it's just crazy how how much there is still to go.
there's so much opportunity ahead, and then you've got the whole like crypto and Web3 environment that's going to be, I think, really exciting and unique. So I just I think a big part of our job is to give people balanced and experienced advice, but also the optimism and the courage to pursue the things that we know are achievable. So it's going to be fun.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, this was amazing. I'm so jealous, and I'm gonna tell my kids. I talked to a sports team owner today. They're gonna be like, Dad, why don't you do that? So it's very cool.
My friend brought it to you. Call me, Jeff. What do you think we can do? But no, thank you for having me.
It's so cool. I'm so happy for you. It's so fun.
We love working with you guys, and hope to do a lot more of it. So yeah.
And my biggest takeaway, just in spending time talking through with you, is like you've just run really hard at these ideas that you are passionate about, and it's worked out well. So I think that's great inspiration for.
Yeah, here's the final necklace I just recently put on. It's a butterfly, and I think that is my, I like just really believe in butterfly effects, and you just go out and follow your joy, make work playful as much as possible, but also just don't be afraid to play, because then it can turn into work. And so I bought this butterfly recently in honor of all the butterfly effects that led me to what became Angel City, which was the most unexpected thing that's happened to me in my career.
Amazing. Well, you should be proud. That's really cool. I'm happy for you.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right, Kara, thanks for the time.